Hey, what is happening, guys? Thank you for tuning into Rules for Rebels. Got kind of an interesting business current event for you guys today, and I was kind of curious to hear what you guys think about it as well. So feel free to drop a comment in the comment section below. Let me know where you guys stand on this issue, especially if you're business owners, because you guys actually are the ones out there hiring people. But this article comes from the AP News. Saw it on Drudge Report this morning. And the article was titled, "More Businesses Are Mellowing Out Over Hiring Pot Smokers." And basically what the article talks about, it's about how a lot of companies are kind of quietly either A, dropping drug testing altogether, or they're continuing to drug test for like opiates, speed, cocaine, etc., but dropping drug testing for marijuana. And so basically the article goes on to say, for the last 30 years or so, employment drug tests were a pretty standard thing for most larger companies. The article talks about a couple companies. I think there was a property management company, a couple manufacturers, a casino, and it talked about how they're dropping marijuana from their drug testing regimen, and some are dropping drug testing altogether. This is due to less stigma attached to weed, the legalization of marijuana in many states, and also unemployment is pretty low right now. They talked about how in Colorado the unemployment rate is like 3%, so there's a rather slim workforce. So companies really can't be like disqualifying workers, especially when like, do you really care if somebody who smokes weed on the weekends or the nights when they're not in your workplace, do you really care like if they're working for you? I know personally I wouldn't have an issue with it. Alexander Acosta, who is actually Donald Trump's head of the Labor Department, even kind of suggested that companies lighten up on marijuana drug testing, and he was quoted as having said, "We have all these Americans that are looking for work. Are we aligning our drug testing policies with what is right for the workforces?" And excluding marijuana from drug tests is the first major shift in workplace drug policies since employers regularly began screening applicants in the 1980s. They did so after a federal law required government contractors maintain drug-free workplaces. Many private businesses then followed suit and started doing drug testing as well. And it's really a pretty big shift for this to happen because the drug testing industry in itself is a huge one. Like, even though you can go to the dollar store and buy a marijuana drug test or really any drug test for $1, the companies who do these drug tests often charge $20, $40, $60, $100, $150. And I think about, like, my girlfriend used to be a supervisor at UPS, and they have a ton of employees, and they also have very, very high turnover. So I'm sure whoever has like the drug testing contract for UPS makes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year off drug testing these employees. And maybe in like a factory setting or a setting where like workplace safety is really important, maybe you still want to do drug testing. But even then, we really shouldn't be doing drug testing. We should be doing impairment testing, because if somebody smoked a joint on Saturday, if they're not high at work on Tuesday, it really doesn't matter, but drug testing would potentially disqualify them from working. Most businesses that have dropped marijuana tests continue to screen for cocaine, opiates, heroin, and other drugs. But James Reedy, an employment lawyer in New Hampshire, says companies are thinking harder about the types of jobs that should realistically require marijuana tests. If a manufacturing worker, for instance, isn't driving a forklift or operating heavy machineries, employers may deem a marijuana test unnecessary. They say, yet many companies are reluctant to publicly acknowledge that they've dropped marijuana testing. This is going to be the new don't ask, don't tell policy, Reedy said. And let's see, the stigma surrounding marijuana use is eroding, compounding pressure on employers to stop testing. 64% of Americans support legalizing pot, a Gallup poll recently found. That's the highest percentage in half a century. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. I've always thought drug testing was a pretty silly policy. Do I want a heroin user or a cocaine user working for me? Probably not. But marijuana, I mean, I'm not saying marijuana benefits anybody's life, but like if you gave me a choice of would I rather hire somebody who drinks or somebody who smokes pot, I'd probably pick the person who smokes pot. Someone who smokes pot isn't not coming into work because they're hungover. Nobody has ever beat their wife because of marijuana. Nobody has ever overdosed on marijuana. Nobody has ever beat or abused a child because of marijuana. People have done all those things for alcohol. I mean, when we look at the statistics, the amount of people who die from like something like aspirin every year is in the thousands. The amount of people who die from cigarettes in the hundreds of thousands. The amount of people who die from caffeine is in the hundreds. Nobody in the history of the world has ever overdosed or died directly from marijuana. So it's a relatively safe drug. nobody is stealing from their employer to support a marijuana habit. It just seems kind of silly. Drug testing has always been very, very silly. It costs a ton of money. You exclude some of the workforce. Some people can't get jobs because of it. And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't affect anybody's work performance at all, assuming they're not using marijuana at the workplace. And I've always kind of said, I've done some like school papers and studies on this for psychology classes and sociology classes and things like that. And it just really, drug testing does absolutely nothing. I could go to the Netherlands, smoke a joint on holiday, come back home 2 weeks later, take a drug test for a job and fail. I didn't break any laws. I'm not currently on marijuana. Like, there's just no reason for it. If you're going to do any testing, it should be impairment testing in the workplace. But outside of that, it's pretty stupid. It's kind of the healthcare industry behind drug testing does a lot of lobbying to keep it going because it's very profitable for them. But as we're seeing, the stigma about marijuana is wearing off. Companies aren't really caring that much, and hopefully we'll see an end to workplace drug testing, or at the very least marijuana being included in workplace drug testing. So I'm curious to see how you guys feel about this issue. I was going to launch into this whole thing about how marijuana was legalized pretty much based off lobbying from the paper industry, because hemp actually makes superior paper, doesn't require as many harsh chemicals to process. It's renewable. It grows faster than trees. It makes a superior quality paper. But I forget the gentleman's name, the tree baron, paper baron guy, basically did a lot of lobbying to make marijuana legal. Also, there were a lot of Mexicans coming up from the Southwest back in, what was that, the 20s or 30s, and Harry J. Anslinger used a whole bunch of like racist propaganda about white women are being raped by blacks and Mexicans, blah, blah, blah. So pretty much the entire premise of marijuana being made illegal was based off of the paper industry pressuring and racism. So there's really no reason it should have been made illegal in the first place. And the drug testing thing is just kind of a continuation of a silly policy. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm curious what you guys have to say. Have you guys been excluded from a job because you failed a marijuana test? Those of you guys out there who run businesses and are employers, do you really care if your employees smoke pot off of work? Let me know what you guys think about this issue. Drop a comment in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you guys later.